How's it going, guys? Welcome back to my F1 22 My Team career. This is episode 4, and we are finally picking our main rival. For the first time in this series, we finally have someone to compare ourselves against, and based on our recent performance, Lando Norris seems just a little bit outside of our skill range, so we end up going with Pierre Gasly, which will still be quite a challenge if I do say so myself. But this week we have an important one, as we recently coming off our first points of our F1 career in Australia. We end up taking home 2 points in the constructors, as well as 2 points for ourselves in the World Drivers' Championship. It is going to be very vitally important to continue to make strides in our efforts towards a World Drivers' Championship as we head to Imola for another round of this, as we actually get a new sponsor opportunity. Finally, 3 races in, we finally get enough acclaim to unlock a second sponsor, and this is going to hopefully be an easier goal to achieve, to make some easy money. We're trying to find that perfect balance between everything, as we know that we're not in the most competitive car still, but we still want to balance out our opportunity to make some money. Now we're taking a look at this Pionite sponsorship, and I think we're going to go with that as a top 12 finish, and I think that seems pretty doable if I do say so myself, as we now head over to our R&D department to take a look at see what we have currently undergoing, as well as potentially being able to add some items. We see actually one of our developments failed. Our energy store cells weight redistribution failed, so we'll get that going again, unfortunately, and we will take a look at what else we can add, get some gearbox improved materials going. At this point, we're just trying to get anything that we can going, just because we do have a lot of ground to make up, as our car is still well behind the rest of the field. But as we advance here, we actually will come up to our Pirelli hot lap of the episode, as a couple of R&D items come in, which is fantastic. We will head to our Pirelli hot lap, and we will talk about what we want to achieve this week at Imola. So we're going to show the whole hot lap, but just kind of sped up, just because the distance targets can sometimes take a while. But for this week, as we head to Imola, our main goal at this point, is I feel like I've said it every episode so far, is try and continue building on the momentum from the previous weekend out. As I mentioned, we were coming off our first points of the season in Albert's Park, as we took home a couple of points and finally finishing in the top 10 for the first time. We are feeling really good and really confident, and Imola is a challenging circuit, but at the same time it's one of my personal favorites to drive in this game as of right now. It's very technically challenging, and very interested in seeing how we can perform come this race weekend. There's actually a bit of forecast of rain, so we could actually be looking at our first wet race and qualifying our first wet weekend, as this also is our first sprint weekend of this MyTeam series, and so we are going to be very interested to see how we can perform in the sprint for the first time. I don't think we'll be necessarily looking at points in the sprint, but it can definitely be a good way to move up the order should qualifying not go as good as we want and or need it to. But that said, sprint weekends are also a great way to get out and check out how the circuit is kind of performing on the weekend as a whole before the actual full-fledged race. This also is finally coming up to a point where we need to start thinking about our component wear, I think, for the first time, as I believe our gearbox is actually starting to get a bit up there in terms of wear. It should be fine for this weekend, but it is something we're going to have to start keeping in mind as we finish up our Pirelli hot lap. A free $100,000 as well as 1,000 acclaim to our name. Definitely enjoying these Pirelli hot laps. It is a little different and a little more fun. we're gonna head back to our R&D department before we finish out the weekend, try and get some of this R&D points off our hands as we're taking a look at everything that is finished already. As we look to always have something going in R&D, we're trying not to waste any time to make sure that we're taking full advantage of all of every single day that we can have. As long as we have R&D points to spend, I think we will indeed spend it. We're also going to finally take a look at, now that we have about $2.9 million in our bank account, we're going to finally start looking at some facility upgrades. Now, this is something I wasn't paying as much attention to as I should in these first few episodes before this, and so it's finally time to really look into it. And here's actually where I make a first mistake, not that I would have known, is that I make an upgrade to our personnel facilities, which apparently is bugged as of right now. I'm still not even sure if it's been fixed yet, but apparently by upgrading the personnel facilities, they do not provide the benefits listed. So that's unfortunately a bit of money wasted as of right now, but it will come back around, I'm sure, as we head on to our one-shot qualifying lap of the weekend. As we head around Imola, we get a pretty terrible start through this first little S section, this little mini chicane, as we quickly fall back to the order. Unfortunately, just not able to really catch the line correctly coming out of there, going extremely wide. And at this point, we're feeling less than good. We're just trying to make up ground as much as we can, while also understanding that, you know, the sprint is really going to be where we find our mark for the actual race. Just as I mentioned, you know, we really aren't looking to score points in the sprint, as only the top 8 get points in the sprint. So at this point, we're just trying to, you know, minimize damage as much as we can. And if we do end up on the back row, it won't be the absolute end of the world, at least on this weekend, as we know that most of the damage that we're going to do is going to be done in the race itself, as qualifying for us right now is probably one of our more weak aspects of our race weekend. It's something we're going to continue to work on, but as of right now, we know that most of our stuff is going to be handled in the race. As we come up to the final stretch down the line, we actually end up qualifying in P21. So last row on the grid, not the last spot on the grid, but it is the last row on the grid as we come up to the sprint race. For the first time, we will line up to 5 red lights for a shorter race, but a fun one nonetheless. So as we line up to the 5 red lights to get our first sprint weekend underway, the lights are out and we are away, lining up directly behind our teammate Enzo Fittipaldi. Alex Albon rather, lining up in front of us to our right. As we get a bit squirrely on this opening straight, we are going to try and make something happen here as we make a huge dive down the inside and end up back into P18, battling with Enzo Fittipaldi for P18. As I mentioned, this is where we're going to make the majority of our moves, as we actually take some front wing damage a little late on the brakes. It's always so hard to predict where everyone ends up braking in the beginning of these races, and so we actually end up taking some front wing damage as we move forward to lap 3. We continue to ride in P8. Unfortunately, we have yet to make up really any ground due to this front wing damage that we kind of just haven't been dealing with. The front end gets a little heavy and it's hard to make those kind of quick movements. You need to really make some stuff happen, and you add in the fact that our car already is less than competitive in the long run, as things get from bad to worse as we're late on the brakes again and our front wing is completely gone. It seems that all the momentum that we were trying to carry over from Australia is completely gone, as we are losing a majority of the performance from our car as we lose our entire front wing. And unfortunately, that honestly will probably be it more than anything, as we decide to continue on, just because at this point, if we can hold on to P18, that will be a blessing in disguise as we end up moving to the final lap. We are actually trying to hold off Pierre Gasly, our rival, from overtaking us all the way down here in P18 and 19, as Charles Leclerc comes home to win this sprint. At this point, we continue to move forward, trying our best to take home this P18 starting position, as you know, it's not going to be the worst starting spot we'll ever have, but at the same time we are just trying to hold off our rival as we run a bit wide here down this last corners, as our front wing loss is definitely starting to show ourselves, as Gasly makes his last lunge down the inside and actually still ends up taking it from us, and things go from bad to worse, as fighting off Pierre for so long only to end up losing out on it in the final straight, as we take P19 of this sprint race, and we have a lot of ground to make up going forward.
Hello there, and welcome back to
Sunday.
Imola, home circuit of the Scuderia Ferrari. We expect to see a lot of local supporters wearing red today, and they've all turned out for what we're expecting will be a sensational event here at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Unlike most Formula One tracks, Imola is driven anti-clockwise and offers our drivers today just over 3 miles of glistening wet tarmac to negotiate. It's made up of a roughly equal split of 9 right-hand turns and 10 left-hand. Watch the drivers on the way into turn 16. Managing their speed there will be crucial, with the rain only adding to the difficulty of that downhill braking section, which then, of course, leads into the track's longest straight, though no DRS there today, of course. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. An immense lap from Carlos Sainz yesterday puts him in pole position, edging out Sergio Perez, who lines up P2. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Hamilton, Russell, Valtteri Bottas and Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, Norris, Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen, Ocon, Ricciardo, Lance Stroll and Joe, Vettel, Fittipaldi, Pierre Gasly and the rookie, Albon, Latifi, Tsunoda and Max Verstappen completes the grid. Now it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track.
So as we move forward to race Sunday, we can see that it will indeed be a wet race here at Imola, and it is going to get very, very interesting as we line up and take our spot on the grid. It's going to be our first wet, rainy race of this 2022 F1 season, and we are looking forward to the challenge. We're hoping that, you know, the rain will slow those ahead of us just enough, and hopefully we can either be reckless enough and get away with it, or lucky enough to move up in the position of these tricky conditions, to say the least. As we continue to move forward, we are going to be setting our race strategy. As you can see, it's just going to be inters all the way. Does not look like we're going to get any reprieve from this rain, as it probably will look to dry up down the end of the race, but at this point we are anticipating inters all the way. Luckily not a full wet race, but you know, our first not dry race of the year will always be exciting. As we move forward here to the formation lap, you know, at this point we just need to get our feet under ourselves as we start in P18, actually, with someone ahead of us taking a grid penalty. We will take that as we officially start in the position we fought Gasly so hard for. But in this one, our goal at this point is going to be, you know, staying on track, staying hopefully in line, as the track hopefully doesn't get too bad, as the conditions don't get worse, and we're hoping to finally regain our footing after such a terrible sprint race just before this full length race. As we come back up to the grid to get this thing underway, we're hoping that we can continue once again to carry that momentum forward, and we'll hopefully come out with a decent result in this one as we line up to get this thing underway. As the lights come on, we will see finally in the wet how we perform, as the lights are out and we are underway once again, following our teammate Fittipaldi as well as Pierre Gasly. I get a terrible start as Albon actually comes shooting past us, and it looks as though we are going to be in for a world of hurt, as Yuki Tsunoda also comes flying past us. It just doesn't seem like our car can really hold up in these wet conditions, even more so than the dry as we continue once more to, we're just getting a brief read on everything that's going on. We're getting it early on the brakes as we do not need any more front wing damage like we saw in the sprint that really set us back and really ended our race kind of before it even began. So at this point, we're keeping an eye on our tire temps, trying to get everything up to temp as best we can. And there you can actually see, as I scroll through, our gearbox actually is getting pretty worn. Actually, our first yellow component, as it's about 2/3 of the way through being worn down, as Tsunoda Yuki just makes his way down along the outside of us, coming around this circuit. As we're really at this point just trying to find the pace and trying to find the balance in this car to try and be competitive, as we make a bit of a lunge down the inside of Yuki, trying to get him back for taking us on the outside. And we continue to do what we have to do to make this race slightly competitive in this first lap. The first lap really just kind of sets the tone for the entire race, as we take a peek around the outside of Pierre Gasly, but just we see better opportunities in our future, and we decide not to do anything too reckless, and we probably smartly back off just a little bit. And if you'll notice here on the top left, we can actually see where we got our grid position, as Max Verstappen actually ends up starting last on the grid due to some, I'm assuming, component penalties. And so at this point, running in P19 in our first wet race of our F1 22 career, we are going to have to decide if we're going to try and defend from the reigning world champion Max Verstappen around Imola, as I'm sure his car will be much better suited for any race, let alone one in the wet, as well as a driver of the capabilities of Max Verstappen. And so as we continue on lap 2, there he is. He's actually moving all the way up on the outside, and he actually gets the move done, but runs a bit wide. And so we seize an opportunity to overtake the reigning world drivers champion, and we're feeling pretty good about that. So when you're running, in P19 and P20, you have to find the little victories and take those when you can get them, as we once again retake our P19 position from Max Verstappen. And I'm sure everyone at home is smiling to themselves as we once again try and defend the reigning world champion. He takes a peek around the outside, and we once again just kind of shut the door on him, kind of push him more to the inside, kind of give him a little bit of wheel-to-wheel action. And we're seeing our opportunity to take him around the outside, and we do. We actually take Max Verstappen around the outside in a wet day in Imola, as he will surely take us down this main straight, no doubt. As we pull up alongside, we kind of force him to the inside. He bumps us, and that's it. Oh my goodness, the reigning world champion gives us a nudge, unseats our car. We actually, oh my goodness, what just happened? Max Verstappen, trying to give him a little bit of a squeeze, just absolutely annihilates us, as no one else apparently takes damage, as I can't remember if that was Albon or Latifi, just absolutely takes off our front left wheel and suspension. And that's it. Our race here at Imola is complete, as Max just gives us enough of a bump and Latifi finishes us off. And what a scene. The reigning world champion just absolutely sends us home packing, literally. How could this happen? What a result. Even though we saw that our weekend was not going to go the way we were hoping, this is something we never would have expected, as we hop on board from Max Verstappen's view, as I'm sure he, annoyed enough having to start at the bottom of the grid and getting a less than ideal beginning to this race. We kind of give him a bit of a squeeze down the inside, and granted, this might be a bit of our fault as we give him a bit of a squeeze from out of position, but just that little move to the right just unseats our car just enough and absolutely sends us into the wall. And the Williams finishes us off. What a result. It's something I never would have expected from the world drivers champion. What a race, what a weekend. So that's us. That's our weekend here at Imola, as Charles Leclerc comes home to finish, Carlos Sainz in P2, and Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes comes home P3. But for the first time, we DNF a race by the hands of none other than Max Verstappen. What a result, what a weekend. And I'm sure there will be a lot of questions asked after this one, both to us as well as Max, who probably just a little bit frustrated at his starting position and his lack of success in the first couple of laps. Just absolutely takes it out on us, I'm sure. And we come out worse for wear, absolutely. And yeah, definitely not the weekend, as the weekend continued to go from bad to worse. We find ourselves knocked out very early, and our bad sprint race turns into an even worse Grand Prix, as we are DNF'd for the first time this season here at Imola. As we take a look at the final standings, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton come home for the podium. And what a weekend. I'm almost stunned, just absolutely speechless, as the reigning World Drivers Champion sends us home nice and early here at Imola. You can see he actually doesn't end up finishing in the top 14 as well, and so you have to wonder just what happened after our race ended. Did he probably just has maybe a bit of damage, as well as just could not make up for the wet conditions. And that does it here for our trip to Imola, as we see Pierre Gasly, our first race with a rival, finishes everywhere above us, as we once again do not finish the race. Here you can see our team acclaimed status currently is level 5s all around. We are hoping to build off of Australia, but unfortunately that will do it here for this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one.